Hello guys, my name is Robert Leva and welcome to Meta Assassins. This is going to be a semi-regular podcast that has to do with Magic the Gathering, specifically the modern format. And we're going to go over a bunch of different topics that are current. For this first pilot episode, we're going to be talking about an individual card, Pack Rat. We're going to be talking about a new deck list that has been discussed on the Magic the Gathering Salvation forums because it was piloted and created by Guillaume Wafo-Tapa, who is regarded by some as the best control player out there, at least for our format. Recently was inducted into the MTG Hall of Fame, so he's clearly a good player. So we're going to talk about his new deck, which happens to be an Esper control deck, and I think there's a lot, his deck raises a lot of questions, and there's a lot to talk about, if nothing else. So, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to also talk a little bit about how to assassinate a meta, and what decks are available if you want to just sort of pick up a deck and do well with it and not be quite as mainstream as most of the people out there that are playing the Juns and the Pods and the Twins and the Trons and so on and so forth. If you are the type of person who like to do stuff that's a little bit outside of the norm, like you want to be a little bit unique and put your own unique spin on things, then I think this webcast, this show is going to be tailored to you a little bit, because that's the way I am personally. Not to say that I can't enjoy and appreciate a deck that's well made and performs well, and even if it is very commonly used, I can still appreciate and respect it. But I like to try to figure out what the common weaknesses of all of these meta decks are, and then attack them at their common weak points. So that's the way I meta assassin. So we'll talk about all of that stuff later on in the show, but let's just, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about the first card here. We'll talk about Pack Rat, and this is a card, it's a Return to Ravnica card, so it's not new. It has been out for a while, but it's not seen much modern play, not much serious play. And I think that a lot of that is going to change here very soon, which is why I wanted to go over this card. This could be one of those hinge cards where certain decks can abuse it in such a way and sort of lean on it, and a deck that might have been fringe or borderline, now that has access to Pack Rat and its built-in game plan that works, completely by itself in whatever deck it's sitting in, they can adopt that and get a huge infusion of stability into your deck. So we'll just talk about what it does. It's a 2 CC black card, 1 black, 1 colorless. It's a rat. Power and toughness are each equal to the number of rats you control. Okay, so now first we'll talk about that. It's not the number of pack rats you control, which when I first saw the card, that's the way I read it. It is the number of total rats, so any rats you control. Now, you might not think that makes a big difference because who plays a rat deck, but there is another card called Mutavault, which is a manland that it's 1 colorless to activate, and it becomes a changeling 2/2. So the Mutavault technically has the rat subtype, and it will pump up the Pack Rat. So, in a deck where you're running Mutavaults, Pack Rat gets free boost from them, which is very nice, and it's not a well-known interaction. So there's there's hidden value there to this particular clause, is all I'm getting at. Alright, now its main ability here. 2 colorless, 1 black, discard a card, but that's relevant. Put a token onto the battlefield that is a copy of Pack Rat. So this is not a different token. It is a literal, it's a copy. It includes the casting cost, so it will trigger, the copy will trigger devotion. Um, and it is in every way identical to Pack Rat. So that gives the card a huge amount of resilience to spot removal. Because if you play this card with the mana open and obviously a card that you don't mind discarding in hand, you play the, for 2 mana, very reasonable, 3 untapped lands. You play it if they abrupt decay it or lightning bolt it or whatever they, insert removal here like Path to Exile, whatever. You respond with this trigger, and in any case, you're gonna like probably at the end of the turn you make another one right away. So the next turn you can swing with 2, which we're gonna kind of see demonstrated here a little bit. This is just an example of Pack Rat interacting with Mutavault as well as making copies of itself. I'm playing against a affinity deck here, so the clock is on for sure. At this point in the game, I've dragged things out to this point where it's late game, and so like I said, so I played the rat. Now whether he can remove it or not is pretty irrelevant because at the end of his turn, I'm gonna be making another rat. So you can see quickly. Just skip ahead here a little bit. So he casts his Etched Champion. At the end of his turn, I just make a copy. Now, next turn, take a look. So I went from last turn, I cast 1 Pack Rat. And on the next turn, I have a chance to swing with 2 rats, pump them up to 2 3s, and then pump them up again to 4 4s. So from a 1/1 to a 3 4 4s in one turn. You see how explosive it can be, in the span of one turn. So it casts as a 1/1, and I end up swinging next turn with 2 4 4s. And that's based off of the Mutavault interaction here. And I didn't pump the Mutavault because I wanted to block his Etched Champion, which does not have protection from colorless. So I can always trade with that. But I could have swung with 2 4 4s there and still had an untapped 4 4 and now 3 3. Just as backup as well. So you see how explosive this gets. And, I'll just zoom in here, fast forward a little bit. Yeah, I end up taking down the game here. Now I'm playing, the deck I'm playing is a mono black deck. It's called 8-Rack. But that's irrelevant because I'm not casting any of my other spells. This is just a pure Pack Rat demonstration. Other than the rack taking down for some damage. The Pack Rat finishes the game out for me here. But in any case, so that's what you can do with Rat. There's a couple other little tricks to it as well. If you have something in play like an ensnaring bridge or something that limits what you can attack with, you can swing with the 1/1 and then turn the Mutavault on or use its ability after you start swinging, so you can swing out of the bridge. But so there's a few other little benefits to it. But what other decks could run this, other than that mono black deck that I was running? Well, this could be run in fairies. This could definitely be run in black green, whatever, black green or junk or jund or whatever. If nothing else, as a sideboard card for the mirror match, because they do not like this card. They are not a fan of this card. Jund, excuse me, black green control, the whole sweeping archetype of it. The way they win is they try and get high value trades. Like they 1-for-1 you, but all their trades are so great that at the end of the game they've got something in play that's bigger than yours, or they have more than yours, or whatever it is, and they beat you down with the advantage they get in all of their 1-for-1 trades. So this card drives them insane because the only thing they have to deal with it is Maelstrom Pulse, and they're not running many of those. It's not too good. That Maelstrom Pulse will clog up a hand. Usually you only see 1 or at most 2 copies of it being run main board. So the pack rat enjoys protection from abrupt decay and terminate, which are frequently like depended on for their removal. It dodges even the Liliana. It dodges all removal if you have the resources to trigger its its ability. I mean, it dodges all removal with the exception of Echoing Truth and Maelstrom Pulse. But yeah, I mean, other than that, so it has resilience. We're going to put it that way. It has resilience, and it just gets out of control very fast. So, what other types of decks could look at this? Black fairies could definitely look at this. They're running the Mutavault anyway as a Fey token. Something like this where they can play it early or they can play it late. And if they play it early, they can lean on it and try and snowball it real quick. They can clear the way with their Thoughtseizes and or IOKs, and then protect it with counter spells. And then anything that's sitting dead in their hands, they pitch to it and then make it get out of control. So Fairy has a very good chance of abusing this. And like I said, the black-green control shells, which those are getting up there as pretty much the most popular board control decks for sure, but up there with the most popular decks lately. So there's a huge place for this card in our meta, and it's not been seen really up until now, but I think you're going to see it more and more. So that's why I wanted to talk about this, and now we can move on. So let me know, post any comments you have about the card and where you think it belongs and what decks you think it can be run in. So we'll take a look at that and we'll address it perhaps in the next episode if we get some interesting discourse on it. Alright, so moving on, let's take a look at this. And this is Guillaume Wafo-Tapa, his Esper deck. So it's been discussed. I wanted to show you it. Here it is, verbatim. The only thing up here is the lands, which, okay, we don't care about those, other than the Celestial Colonnade, which is his, from what I see, his primary finisher here. I mean, the only other finishing move he has is the White Sun Zenith. But so I'm going to assume that he finishes most games with the Celestial Colonnade. The rest of the deck is... I'm going to say this deck is a mess, to be honest with you, because we have got some extremely questionable choices here. Alright, so we'll just start at the beginning and we'll work our way up the curve. Okay, so, alright, 4 Path to Exiles. Okay, agree. You're playing Esper. This is one of the best reasons to have white. Path to Exile, it's the best removal in the format, period. So, okay, 4 of those in Esper, that's a no-brainer. Okay, I totally agree. Moving on to next card. Okay, Spell Snare. At a count of 4. I am not a gigantic fan of Spell Snare in general. I think it is just it is a hard counter, and that's nice. I think it's really limited. In many cases, you're going to find it dead, but there is no 1cc counter that doesn't have that problem. You've got your Spell Pierces and your Dispels and a few other choices, but overall, I guess you can run 4 of these, but if it was me, I would split it up 2 and 2 between this and Spell Pierce, or maybe, some, 1 to 4 1cc slots, like mix up to 3 in some kind of distribution. But he wants to run 4 Spell Snares. I can't argue that it is wrong, because it's just situational. So far so good. Moving on. But okay, now here's where it all starts to kind of break down here. Okay, so we've got the Remand at a 2 count. So what does Remand do? If you get it early enough, it's a solid tempo boost, and that's pretty much it. But this deck is really not trying to be a tempo deck. It buys you a turn. It time walks you in some cases. That's great. That does not solve any kind of problems for you on a permanent basis. And in a deck like this that is planning on going late game, you remand the creature back to their hand. So by the time it's time to sweep, they have one less on the board because you've remanded it. I don't know. I think the tempo move is off here. I would run, if you're going to run something like this at 2cc, if you're looking for a counter spell, the generic go-to is Mana Leak, which, I mean, yeah, I've had problems with it in the past, but it's the best we got in Modern, and there's really no way around it. It's the best. Maybe you could make a case for Negate here, but okay, Mana Leak is your catch-all. So, right here is where I would start. Okay, so -2 remand, +2 Mana Leak is my call. Now we're moving down here. And this is just the most shocking thing about this whole deck, if you ask me, even over some of the really bad cards in here. 2 Snapcaster Mages, 2. This is the best blue creature in the format. There is no question about that. This is the best blue critter, one of the best blue critters ever printed in any format. It's that good. It is a 2cc demonic tutor on a body with instant. I mean, what the hell more do you want off of a blue card? I mean, now you've got 4 Path to Exiles or whatever else you want to flash back. Pretty much everything in this deck can be flashed back, and he's only got 2 of them. So there needs to be 4 here. I don't care what else has to happen to the deck. If you are not running 4 of these, you're wrong. I'm sorry. You need 4 of these. If nothing else, it's a flash beater. There's no downside to this card. It's low on the curve. It's gigantic value. It's almost always a guaranteed 2 for 1. Why would you not run 4 here? All right, so that needs to be set to 4. Okay, think twice. I'm not a huge fan, but I cannot say this is one of those cards where if you like it, go ahead. I would prefer, my suggestion is Telling Time over this, because this provides card advantage, but it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of mana commitment. The Telling Time, it replaces itself in your hand for the same cost. So essentially, this replaces itself. The Telling Time replaces itself. The Telling Time, you get to filter your draw to your next 2 draws out on top of that. So that, I mean, I can't, like I said, I can't counsel against it, but I would run something else. It wouldn't be my first choice. I've used them before in U-White-R, and I've always felt like they were lackluster at best. But whatever. I won't harp on it. That's an okay card. It's an okay choice. Shadow of Doubt is another one of those where it's like, I think it should be in the sideboard, but I can't really scream about it. The only reason I could scream about either of those 2 is because we're looking at Snapcaster at a 2 of, and I would have 2 more Snapcasters and 2 less of either of those, even if it meant there was none of these. But, you could just do 2 less of the Think Twices and put in 4 Snapcasters. I mean, come on, that's a no-brainer. That is a no-brainer. Alright, moving on. Esper Charm. It's a good card. One of the better charms, the 3cc charm cycles. I like this one a lot. That said, it's an instant 2cc draw. It's the only one in our format that can do that at instant speed. Draw 2 cards, just raw draw them. But, it's 3cc on it, and so the card is, it's pricey. And the other 2 modes, destroy target enchantment, might be very useful. It could be dead. Players discards 2 cards at instant speed. Now that could very well be useful, especially when you play it in their draw step. They could have a card in hand, they go up to 2 in their draw step, and you instant discard it. So that, and then they have to lose both unless they're instants, of course. So, that's good. I like it. I think it's playable in Esper. I don't know if I would have a full 4 count of it. That seems to really want to, this at 4 with all of the other stuff we've got coming after it on the curve, not including this garbage, it kind of raises. I like the I like my mana curves a little bit more lean and fluid, but yeah, again, this is another one I won't argue with. I think 4 is a little bit high on the CC, but it definitely has a place. Moving on, we've got Wrath and Supreme Verdict. He's got basically just 3 sweepers. He's split it 2 and 1, so that if one gets, like, extirpated, he's still got another sweeper in there. So that's the reason to split those two. Great. Sweepers in here make a lot of sense. No arguments. If anything, I would say if you're going to have 4, like if you're going to have 4 of these, fatty cards, I would have 4 on the sweeper side. But, there's always sideboard room for that. Cryptic Command at 4. I agree. I definitely agree. I think Cryptic Command is one of the strongest blue cards in the format, and being able to snap it back and then you return the Snapcaster to your hand. I mean, it's extremely great synergy here. It's another one of those automatic 2-for-1s. Just a great card overall. Hard counter, bounce, tap them down and swing. There's a bunch of uses. Great card. So I'm fine with that at a 4. Now let's look at this garbage. He's got this at 2, and his freaking Snapcaster count is only 2. This has got to be one of the worst counter spells that he could have chosen here. Delve. So it's 2 CC. It's not even 1 CC. It's a 2 CC X, where they have to pay X. There's a lot of 1 blue and then X, and they have to pay, and then there's usually a little benefit after that for it. But this is 2 blue and X, and the so-called benefit for it is that you can pay the colorless casting cost part of it by discarding cards in your graveyard. Ooh, what a reward. I get to ruin my graveyard, which is essentially an extension of my hand when I have Snapcaster in play. I get to ruin my graveyard to overpay for a counterspell that is still not even a hard counter. They can, if they have the mana, they can pay it if they come up with the mana. So, you've other choices you could put here. Mana Leak, 2 CC, drains 3. They need 6 mana and or graveyard cards, or 4 graveyard cards, or 6 total mana to do better than a Mana Leak with this card. 6 mana. Yeah, no. Okay, so that break-even point is so far down the line that the Mana Leak just crushes this thing. Okay, another card, Condescend. It's 1 blue and X, and you get to scry 2 afterwards. This is a solid card. If you feel like you need that kind of effect, why not Condescend? It doesn't screw up your graveyard, and it, gives you a scry, and it costs less. I mean, there's no downside. Dissolve. It costs 2 blue and 1 colorless. That's it. Guarantees to counter the spell, and you get a scry out of it. So there's a lot of choices out there. Or the 2 blue and 1 C, or in 1 colorless, and exile the spell. So, which gets around some of those spells that can't be countered, like Thrun the Last Troll and Slaughter Games. If you exile the spell, they can't. It's not being countered. It's being exiled. So, there's a lot of other choices there. And then we've got this White Sun Zenith. Okay, it's a one of, but other than the Celestial Colonnades, it's his only win con. And yeah, it's a surprise and whatever, but it's 1 card. He's really depending on these colonnades to do the work here. And then Sphinx's Revelation at 2 count. I agree. Yeah, I think that's a perfect number for Esper. You want to play a long game. You don't want to see him too much, but you want to see one in the case of a long game. So 2 is the right number there. The White Sun Zenith, that's fine as a one of. Who cares? It's a one of win condition. He needs more than what he's got. So this list went top 16. So as much criticism as I have for it, it placed top 16 at a 2,400 player event. So what conclusions can we draw about that? I mean, I think the first thing that we can say is, look, this guy is one hell of a player. Okay, so he's a great player, and he can pilot decks that are suboptimal uh, as good, if not better, than most people can pilot decks that are much more optimal. So, he's got a great amount of skill. No one can question that. He just got into the Hall of Fame. Um, Another thing you can draw from this is he must have had some really nice matchups. He must have gotten exactly what he had hoped to. I'm not looking at a sideboard here, but to get top 16, I'm guessing he probably did get a lot of the matches he wanted to see. So he got a bit lucky. He's a fantastic player, and I guess we can just sort of conclude that if you are a really good player and you do get a little bit lucky, you can take a suboptimal list and go the distance with it. That does not mean people at home should look at this list and say, oh yeah, that logic knot, boy, this guy, he's such a great player. He sees these cards and no one else can see how awesome they are, but he's so good that he can see cards like this and then play them and win with them because the cards are awesome and his deck is awesome. No, he is awesome. This deck is rubbish. I'm sorry, but this deck is it's for an Esper deck, which there are so many amazing cards in control cards in blue, white, black. Those are the three main control colors. There are so many awesome cards in that to choose from that there is no reason to have this garbage in here. There is no reason for this filler. We don't need all of this. Maybe some of them in very small doses, and cards like this should be gone altogether. They don't fit the game plan. There's too many of those. And shore up the cards that make sense here, and get the cards in here that are considered Esper staples for a reason. Thoughtseize, for crying out loud. Thoughtseize and Snapcast and Snapback of Thoughtseize is crushing in some cases to some decks. Shoring this up, getting in better counter spells. We need mana leaks in here. I'd like to look at some 3CC counter spells. If he's willing to run 3CC utility spells like Esper Charm, why can't we look at Dissolve? And now we've got a really consistent counter spell. How about we look at Geist of St. Traft in a deck like this? As a very solid win condition. I mean, you're going to be able to protect him with all of this. Like, if you get rid of some of this dross here and make it a much more proactive, threat removal type of deck with your Thoughtseizes and potentially IOKs even, your better counter spells, get rid of these filler draw spells and get some real counters in there. And now the prospect of swinging with Geist of St. Traft is pretty reasonable. You just wipe the board, play the Geist, start swinging with hit and then the colonnade, and it's all over with the shouting. So yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement here, but I think it just goes to show you just how good the guy is at playing the game. It's almost a troll deck. If you ask me, I would say he was trolling, but I'd like to hear your comments on it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. So that pretty much wraps up this section. The last thing I want to talk about is meta assassination. What I do, I'm going to show you my deck, my deck you saw in the Pack Rat segment. This deck is called 8-Rack. You may or may not be familiar with it. I've got a whole lot of videos on it. If you aren't familiar with it and you're interested in it, feel free to look through, and there's weeks and weeks worth of videos for you to watch on this. This is the deck that I use. Now, why do I use this deck? Okay, number one, it's not prepared for, because it's a discard deck. Okay, we'll just keep it simple. This is a discard deck. And modern players are not prepared for discard. They're not used to seeing it. People that invest in decks don't invest in these fringe strategies typically because they're scared. They want to get the most out of their money. It's not going to be common. Now, since no one's prepared for a a discard deck, that's why this is a meta assassin, because you attack all the decks at an angle that they're not prepared for. So we attack their hand, we control their hand, we control what threats enter the board. We have ways to deal with the threats as they come through, but the main focus is to attack their hand and control what spells they have access to. And while that goes on, we kill them with cards like the rack that punish them for not having a hand, which we, if they try and build it up, we have a lot of ways to keep their hand empty. So, and then if that fails, we have the pack rat in all its glory, like we talked about earlier, as a backup plan. The pack rat is sort of a new addition to 8-rack, but it's made a huge splash. It's jumped the power level up of the deck in general significantly because its backup plan is just so strong. It's that good. So that's a little bit on meta assassination. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this show. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on what I can do to improve, what you would like to see. If you have any questions, please post questions. I'll address questions during the next cast. And appreciate you guys watching. Let me know what you want to see. And I will, if you are interested in being someone, if you know a lot about Modern, and you're interested in being on a cast, on a pod show like this, let me know, and I'll talk, and I can just Skype you in, and we can talk about different cards or something like that. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. I'm working on a website to sort of base all of this stuff out of, but for right now, it's just going to be YouTube. So again, appreciate you watching. Feedback is very welcome, and thanks for being here. Later.